Today, we're diving into a story that, according to our source material, is a pretty big deal. We're going to unpack a sweeping indictment against the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC. Now, this is an organization that's famous for fighting hate groups, but the allegations we're about to walk through claim the SPLC might have been secretly funding the very groups it swore to dismantle. It's a lot to take in, so let's get into it.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the core accusation, which is a real shocker. Then, we're going to follow the money to see how this whole alleged scheme was pulled off. After that, we'll dig into the controversial history that our source uses for context and explore the political connections that are being alleged. And finally, we'll zoom out and talk about why this whole story really matters.
All right, let's jump right into the deep end. The SPLC's entire public mission, the reason they exist, is to dismantle violent extremist groups. But this indictment, as laid out in our source, alleges a complete 180 on that mission. A reversal so stunning it basically turns their whole purpose upside down.
And here it is. This is the single most explosive claim from the source material. The allegation is that, for at least a decade, the SPLC took donations, money from thousands of people who wanted to fight hate, and secretly funneled that cash right to the leaders of the very organizations they were supposed to be fighting. I mean, just think about that for a second.
And this isn't some vague claim. The source gets very specific. The list of groups allegedly getting this money includes some of the most notorious extremist organizations out there. We're talking about various KKK factions, the National Socialist Movement, and others. The indictment alleges payments went straight to leaders and informants inside these groups.
So the big question is, how on earth could something like this happen? How could you hide it? Well, the source claims it was all done through a pretty complex financial scheme. So let's follow the money and see how it allegedly worked, because it all boils down to a single charge: bank fraud.
Now, to really get what's at stake legally, we have to understand bank fraud. It's basically when you trick a bank or another financial institution to illegally get your hands on money. And according to the source, this was the central tool in the entire alleged operation. It's how everything was supposedly hidden in plain sight.
Okay, so the source breaks the alleged scheme down into 4 basic steps. Step 1, you raise a ton of money from well-meaning donors with the promise to fight hate. Step 2, you create fake companies, shell companies, to act as a cover. Step 3, you open up bank accounts using these fake company names. And finally, Step 4, you use those accounts to funnel the money to the leaders of extremist groups.
And we're not talking about small change here. According to the source, the investigation so far has uncovered over $3 million in alleged fraud. And listen to this. That's just what they've been able to trace. The actual total could be way, way higher.
The source lays out some pretty sneaky tactics here. The shell companies were given these really bland, harmless-sounding names, right? Like the Constitution Group or Fox Photography. The indictment even claims they found a way to open bank accounts without the proper ID, getting around security measures put in place by the Patriot Act after 9/11. That's a huge deal.
But here's the thing. Our source material argues these allegations didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It makes the case that this indictment is really just the latest chapter in a long and pretty controversial history. So let's take a quick look at the timeline they've put together.
The source connects dots going way back, trying to build this narrative of a recurring strategy. It points to a KKK leader in 1922 blaming terror on mysterious outside actors, then to testimony from 1938 claiming that communists were secretly setting up KKK chapters just to stir up chaos. And then it points out that the SPLC's own co-founder, Morris Dees, actually represented a Klansman in court just 10 years before he founded the SPLC. The source suggests this all shows a pattern.
So, what's the point of this history lesson? Well, the source argues it reveals a kind of playbook. You create or amplify chaos to steer public opinion and maybe even influence laws. And it presents this current indictment as just the latest example of that very playbook in action.
And this, of course, brings us to the political angle, because the source alleges this scheme wasn't just about money, it was about political power.
This slide really lays out the core conflict. On one side, you have the SPLC's public mission, fight extremism. But on the other side, you have the alleged motive, as drawn from our source. A business model where, if there isn't enough real hate to fight, you kind of manufacture it. And why would you do that? Well, to keep qualifying for grants and to fuel a political narrative that thrives on division.
The reporting we're explaining here suggests that these allegedly manufactured incidents consistently created political turmoil that was beneficial to one side. The source also makes another pretty stunning claim, that an initial federal investigation into all of this was mysteriously shut down, only to be reopened later on.
And here is maybe the single most explosive political claim from the source. It alleges that one of the people who was on the SPLC's payroll was also an organizer of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, an event that completely shook the nation.
Okay, so after all those details, the money, the history, the politics, let's pull back for a second and ask the really big question. If these allegations are true, what does it all mean? What are the ripple effects here?
You know, this really gets to the core of why this story matters to every single one of us. The entire nonprofit world, it runs on one thing: trust. Your trust. When you donate your hard-earned money, you trust it's going where you think it's going. A scandal this big could shatter that trust, and not just for one organization, but for all of them.
So who really got hurt here? The source identifies three main groups of victims in this alleged scheme. First, you've got the donors, who gave their money in good faith. Second, the banks and financial institutions that were allegedly tricked and used to commit fraud. And third, the American public, who had to deal with the division and chaos these actions allegedly created.
And the fallout goes beyond just the SPLC. The source points out that as a 501c3 nonprofit, the SPLC can get taxpayer-funded grants. So these allegations, they raise some really serious questions about government oversight. I mean, how do we make sure that our money, whether it's from a private donation or a public grant, is actually being used for what it's supposed to be used for?
Ultimately, the source material leaves us with this really critical challenge. In a world of shell companies and hidden money trails, how can any of us really be sure our good intentions aren't being used against us? How do we know if the dollar we donate is helping to solve a problem, or if it's secretly being used to create one? It's a tough question, and it really challenges us to look beyond the mission statement and start demanding a whole new level of transparency.